Hello. Hello, everyone. I've been told I have to introduce the speakers as they walk in. This is Mr. G.V. Prasad, co-chairman of Dr. Reddy's Lab Limited, a global pharmaceutical company, as you know, and a Hyderabad presence. And he is the author of Birds and Beliefs. And we have Aasheesh Pittie on the right, eminent ornithologist, senior Deccan birder, and author of the wonderful The Living Air, which was actually the debut for Living Air, launched at Goethe Centrum. It was actually an HLF online program. And I had the great honor of being the conversational partner for Aasheesh. And we dealt with a lot of the issues in detail. So it's there online if any of you want to kind of listen to it. But this is a literary session. So the focus will be on the two books we have here. Slip of the tongue. And it's, I want to actually talk about the ways in which bonding, I resisted the title actually, but bonding with birds is a perfect way to begin both the relationship with birds that each of these authors has, but also the relationship with each other. And so I want to actually start with, they have a Jab You Met story because they have bonded a very long time ago, it seems. So maybe I'll start with, in whichever order you want to go first, where did you meet each other? And I should just add that in the introduction to Prasad's beautiful book, Birds and Beliefs, he does thank and acknowledge Aasheesh Pittie as his introduction to ornithology. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit more about where you met and what the association has been.
Hi, everyone. So we realized in a photograph that Prasad and I were together in school till about, I think, the 4th class. And then our children studied together in the same school. And both of us are fond of birds and have been bird watching together on and off for almost 10 years now.
That's amazing.
I think it's 20 years. Yeah. So we both were in the same class, but I don't have memories of having a conversation with him at that time. But he actually introduced me to bird watching and nature. And he inspired many youngsters, many bird watchers I see in the audience, to pick up birding and build that eye for nature. So he's a very special person, and I'm very happy to share the dais with him.
That's so wonderful. It was a nice discovery today. But getting back to bonding as connection, as a relationship with birds, it's the emotional bonding is front and center for both of these authors in their books. The subtitle of, actually it's encapsulated in 2 words, pleasure for Aasheesh Pittie, the pleasures of birds and bird watching is the subtitle of his book, and passion for Prasad Garu. And these are the emotional color of how you kind of associate not just with birds themselves, but the birding experiences is a very important one. And I think it's encapsulated by your titles. Could you, you've talked about this before, Aasheesh, but could you tell the audience here a little bit more about The Living Air? It comes from a romantic poet, Wordsworth, and why you picked it.
So the bird watching journey, of course, started by watching birds. I was and still am a loner in some ways, and birds are the perfect audience, or birds are the perfect subject to occupy a loner's mind. And when I started, it was initially like every birder. I used to chase a bird and loved noting down the number of birds I saw, etc. But gradually I realized that there is more to it, and there is, if one really thinks of it, a oneness. A oneness between all of non-human life and human life. Yes, we cannot communicate with each other, but one can mentally be with them. And that's where the pleasure really started when, I tried to meld with the surroundings and allowed the surroundings and the birds to come to me instead of me going all the time chasing after them. And that's how I became a birder of a single place. I don't mind watching the same bird again and again because, as they say, you don't step into the same river twice. I say you don't watch the same bird twice. It's always a different bird. The title of the book, The Living Air, comes from a famous poem by Wordsworth. And it speaks about this, that poem speaks about this love for nature and the oneness of life on earth. And that's where the pleasure has come from.
And it's a spiritual connection.
It is. Of course, it's a spiritual connection. There's no other way one can connect with non-human life except spiritually.
And Prasad, with birds and beliefs, what are the beliefs we're talking about?
So my main passion in life was my company. It was Dr. Reddy's before everything else for the first 15, 20 years of my life in business. So I was introduced to bird watching by Aasheesh. I picked up that hobby. Another friend of mine and a few of my close friends, for my 50th birthday, gifted me some expensive camera gear. And then I started photography, and then I combined bird watching and photography. But this book is about not as much, it's not only about birds, but it's also about people who inspired me, quotes which inspired me, and sometimes my own lessons that I learned. And I captured them along with the pictures. The pictures tell a different story about nature and all that, but the quotes are what, in my journey in Dr. Reddy's, helped me think about what needs to be done in the company, how we want to build the company, and various aspects of the culture that we have in the company. So the quotes are as important as the birds and the pictures of the birds.
And just to put it in some context, I think we were speaking yesterday and you said the photographs come from a decade of at least 10 years of trips to various nature parks, but the quotes you've been collecting over a lifetime, right?
Yeah, so I have a small book where I write down stuff. It's the same book that I've been using for almost 30 years now. And those quotes have been transcribed here and interpreted for the audience, what the quote meant for me at that time and how it helped me in building the culture in the company.
I hope we can, I think, get into some of the quotes in detail at the end. But before that, I'll start in the order, like start with you first. How did this particular book come to you? I mean, and why this pairing of these quotes with these, and I think there are about like photographs of at least 50
Maybe
species? Yeah, something like that?
Yeah, somewhat like that.
Yeah, so how, how did it come together? And what was the intention? Who was the audience, intended audience?
So originally I started off compiling my quotes and various things that inspired me. And I thought I'll build a book out of that. But, I then felt that, it's not going to be that interesting. People don't read books that much. Then I had this whole collection of pictures, of over 10,000 pictures taken over a decade, and thought we can pair them both with a picture and a quote. So that's how this idea came in. And I took some help from people who could design well and put the book together with a quote, the interpretation of the quote as it applied to me, and of course the pictures.
And Aasheesh, what
so
about...
that picture is of a bald eagle. Yes. And it's a very interesting story. We just landed in Alaska in a seaplane at Katmai National Park. And then we saw that in the very far distant eagles flying. And we just randomly took a shot and it turned out beautiful.
And I think you will get a lot of questions about techniques, like later on, photographic techniques. audience. What about the intended audience? Like, and who is reading this book?
I started out actually writing it for myself because it was a kind of a reflection of my journey over 30 years. But today I share it with my colleagues, with business leaders and customers. And they see the pictures and then some of them read the quotes also. But the pictures are the main thing for most people.
And you said all your colleagues
Yeah,
have.
a lot of the top 200 colleagues have the book.
I should just add that both books are available at the Book Point. And so those of you who don't have copies yet, please go buy it. And they're well worth it. Aasheesh, would you like to sort of answer that same thing of how did the book, I know that it's based on about 40 years of field notes, observational study, and inveterate note-taking, right? So how, and also the essays are out of chronological order, but if maybe you could just run through quickly how, you came up with this particular structure in this book.
So I've been writing since the early 80s, maybe 1978. I had a small so-called scientific amateur note published. But my first big thrill of publishing was in the Deccan Chronicle, I think sometime in 1980. And on and off I've been writing, and even at that time whenever I met people, they used to say that, we love the way that somebody is talking about birds. And public memory is short, and essays which were written maybe 20, 30 years ago tend to fade from memory. And for several years, I had in mind a compilation of those essays to bring them out in a book form. And every author has to go to publishers, and I also went, and then I found this one wonderful publisher who said, yes, we will go ahead. And so the essays were compiled together. Out of several more, I have, we selected these because it has to be a book has to be of a particular size, and the publisher and the editor are the best people, organizations to decide that because they know the market. And though I sent all the essays to the editor, she very kindly organized them into 4 sections in the book, and which fell in very well. And I thought entitling them, a section on birds, then on birding, which is bird watching, short form for bird watching, and some birders, some people who mentored me and who, I enjoyed birding with, and then a few chapters on my kind of birding. So my kind of birding is not what many people do. My kind of birding, as I said a little earlier, was staying in one place, going to the same location again and watching the wildlife there. People like to, I also have done it, chase birds across countries, continents, deserts, all sorts of habitats because they want a list of so many. Nothing wrong with that. The more non-human life you engage with, I think you become more human in that. So this is how the book has come into being.
And I think you'll read out later on, if there's time, a little bit from my kind of birding.
Sure.
Because it's a very unique and introspective way in which you approach the thing. That kind of leads me into while there are huge similarities and kinship between both you and the books, the 2 books, there are also huge differences. And one that has to do with geography and locale. And you alluded to it a little earlier, Aasheesh, when you said the book really, The Living Air is really about birds in our urban backyard, or Deccani birding, Deccan birding in and around Hyderabad, and trying to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, that kind of thing. Prasad, I'm struck by, these are a large number of trips you've taken to quite, let's say, exotic destination birding locales. I was thinking actually of you said the most recent trip was to Antarctica to shoot both the Gentoo and the penguins there. Could you speak, starting with Prasad, could you speak to the trip itself? You
Sure,
know, and
sure.
actually I was struck a little bit by something that Aasheesh had once told me. He said the quest to see rare and endangered birds begins with travel. You know, you don't find it in your backyard. And this, you were referring to the Jordan's cursor and even the Great Indian bustard. But if you can actually follow up Prasad's,
sure.
you know, like description of Alaska.
Before I talk about Antarctica, I'd like to highlight a fundamental difference between Aasheesh and me. Aasheesh is an expert ornithologist who also does business. I am a hardcore businessman who also does birding. So it's a little bit of difference.
Well put.
Yeah. And there are many people who have benefited from his knowledge, wisdom, guidance. And I've seen him speak to young children and explain to them very patiently the bird's behavior, various things, how to do the watching and all that. So in that sense, I am not like him. I'm an amateur still. I traveled a lot because I'm not only interested in the birds, I'm interested in the landscapes, I'm interested in the mammals, various wildlife. Birds is one part of that whole experience. Most recently, we went to Antarctica, and one common feature of wherever we go, whether it is the Arctic, whether it's Alaska, whether it is any of the colder places or the warmer places, there's always this, talk about how the climate is changing, how the glaciers are receding, how the wildlife has come down, and the changing weather. This is quite a, common feature wherever we go. And same thing happened to us in Antarctica. We went in there expecting to be very hostile, cold weather, but it wasn't. It was not as cold as it should have been. And that was partly the climate change in action is what we were told. We flew to South America, then we took the flight into Antarctica. We didn't take the Drake's Passage, which is quite a challenge for people of our age in terms of the ship voyage. So we flew, we took the easier way out. We were on a very comfortable ship. Every day we were landing twice or so. We went around the archipelago. We saw wildlife, but more than the wildlife, the landscape was unbelievable. The ice, the ocean, and of course there was wildlife. There was marine wildlife like whales, seals, penguins, and other small colonies of birds. But overall, it was a fantastic experience. It was very different from the Arctic, which I had seen a couple of years ago. And it's a phenomenal experience for all of us.
Did you go to the Indian base or you were
No,
on the
we
ship?
saw the base from a distance. We were on an international ship. We were not allowed to go anywhere else. Yeah.
And Aasheesh, would you like to read something about the Jordan's Great Indian Bustard, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, so before I do that, I would like to point out one thing. For a corporate head of Prasad's standing, it shows his passion and his calmness of his mind to pursue a passion which requires that calmness to watch birds. And to bring it to a level where he plans his holidays in such a way, his work in such a way that perhaps he can go bird watching on a few days or while bird watching work. So it intermingles and it's very difficult to do that. But he's done it so well, and the book is a landmark publication for all of us because it has this combination of two, and that is something to be greatly appreciated. Now, there are I speak of two very endangered birds in my book. One bird has not been seen for maybe 20 years. That is the Jordan's courser. It's named after ornithologist whose name was Jordan, Dr. Jordan. He was a medical doctor. And the other one is the Great Indian Bustard, which missed being the national bird because Mrs. Gandhi said it might be misspelt. And so this bird also, it's a large bird for those who haven't seen it. Standing that tall, it's a grassland bird, and grasslands across India are a endangered habitat, perhaps as endangered as the bird. So we talk of flagship species, and generally we look at cats and, but the bustard is a flagship species of the grasslands. And I wrote this piece when some of us had gone many years ago to a place called Rolapadu in Andhra Pradesh. And we were lucky to see bustards. And I remember when this place was discovered, the Hindu carried a front page news. No, Hindu wasn't there at that time. Maybe the Deccan Chronicle carried, where 30 bustards were seen in a single photograph. Now there are just 150 perhaps alive in India, and most of them are in Gujarat and Rajasthan. So I'll read out a little bit about this bird. Species become extinct individual by individual, and this was the case here. There are many theories about the causes of this debacle. Too many people and the resulting agricultural boom, too many black bucks as a result of total protection, widespread grazing within the sanctuary resulting in the increase of unpalatable vegetation for grasshoppers, which the bustard feeds on, the bustard's prey, and clandestine poaching being some. Also a slackening of guard by those entrusted with the care of this irrepressible natural heritage and national treasure, for it is not found anywhere else in the world. They seem to have forgotten that protection is only the first step towards ensuring the survival of a threatened species, that the consequent second is active management. This is the situation across the entire reducing range of the great Indian bustard. Hanging by the thread of human apathy and negligence is a member of a family that evolved 40 to 50 million years ago, perfecting a way of life on the short grass plains and arid regions of India. From its stronghold in the Thar, where its populations have halved since the 1980s, across Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, the bustard is slowly but surely losing out. It has already been hounded out by changing land use patterns from Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha and Tamil Nadu. The bustard is not ready to die yet, but like Abhimanyu, it does not know how to escape from the Chakravyuh of habitat destruction that surrounds it. We are choking it to death. The disappearance of any species from the face of the earth is an irreversible tragedy whose finality cannot be emphasized enough. It's a physical loss for the natural world, a broken link in the proverbial chain of life. Increasingly, almost singularly these days, extinction is a direct result of human activity, the sixth of mass extinctions, the Anthropocene. By perpetrating these tragic and callous acts, we walk a one-way path that leads to the edge of a precipice from which there is no turning back. Have you ever wondered what humanity is losing by the physical impoverishment, beyond the physical impoverishment that the loss of a species brings to an ecosystem? To me, the great Indian bustard is as important a part of this planet as is a tiger or a tiger beetle, a danayid eggfly or an earthworm churning the soil, breathing life into mud. The extinction of each species diminishes us and negates our collective intelligence. The bustard stands for the well-being of our grasslands and the myriads of life forms comprising that ecosystem. It strides through a landscape that gave character to my nation and to my brotherhood of Gujar, Maldhari and Bishnoi. In accepting its presence and rejoicing in its freedom, I stand tall and be a part of the land that has sculpted the genesis of our agrarian lifestyle. The bustard struts in a wilderness that cannot be restricted to the insular and limited activities of human societies. It beckons the one human character that soars above them, our unassailable spirit. We cannot survive the 22nd century successfully within the confines of our achievements alone. Our spirit yearns to walk with the bustard and to thrill at the jumping grasshoppers underfoot, to feel the wind's caress as it bends a sea of grass heads, to ruminate at the ebb of day under a gently burning purpling, blackening sky. For deep down, we realize that the spirit of the land peoples our breath and ultimately strengthens our work. Its aroma is the only constant in our temporal world. It will not be denied.
Wonderful. So evocative. When was that written, Aasheesh, the particular essay? Because I'm thinking of the problems bastards are facing now with downed power lines. Roughly?
2001. 2001.
I want to move to something that's central to Prasad's book, the role of photography and another kind of bonding, another kind of relationship between text and image. And both of you, that's another difference, I would say, between the two books. Aasheesh, when we talked about it at the book launch, but your deliberate choice of line illustrations by Sangeeta Kadur, they pepper the whole narrative, was a deliberate choice because I think you wanted the response to the text to be tactile or to let the reader feel that the artist was in that environment. And I'm going to ask you to speak about this in a moment. But by contrast, I think the pairing of your, the quotes that you spoke about with the really exquisite photographs is something, you know, that I would like to urge you to speak about, the process about it. Not necessarily why these particular photographs, but how some of your particular lens or how you actually shot them allowed you to get at so much stillness, you know, in so much activity. You know, like you have darting, you have the flight. And so if you could speak a little bit about the role of how the photographs in some ways also drive your narrative, although you've said there's no order. You know, could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the photographs have been taken over a very long period of time, and they were just capturing the bird in that moment. And as Aasheesh knows and sometimes doesn't like, the photographs want to capture the best part of the bird's actions, feeding or doing something, you know. And so we patiently wait for the bird to do something and then click. And these days, electronic photography is so good. You can take thousands of images and edit for the best. So all of that has helped me capture these pictures so well, I would say. But to be honest, I didn't really think about the relationship between the quote and the picture. And I thought I'll leave it to the imagination of the reader to do that. In some places, there is a matching where for example, I said, flocking birds learn better, and so do, you know, corporates where people collaborate, work together, as opposed to territorial birds. Did you know this, that territorial birds take a long time to develop new skills, whereas flocking birds very quickly propagate their skills and quickly learn a new technique for feeding or something. This is something I read. And it happens in corporates too. People who are territorial don't learn from each other, whereas they work together as a community, they learn from each other, and the whole organization benefits. And that's why collaboration is a value which is highly emphasized in good companies. So there are such things, and I saw in one place that the bird has a perspective. And I talk about perspective there, and the bird is perched on the top and seeing that. So sometimes there is some correlation between the quote, which inspired me, as well as the picture, but the pictures were taken on their own and without any premeditation. And you can't predict what's going to happen in nature. There are very interesting pictures, sometimes birds hunting fish, finding skink and eating it up, things like that. So when we go for photography, just focus on the subject, capture the moment. These days, cameras are so good and very reasonable. So anybody can use a camera today.
Maybe we can leave it to question, I mean, in the Q&A period when you can talk about maybe a specific photograph and the techniques that, or the challenges and the obstacles.
Sure.
Aasheesh, if you could just respond to that, and then we have one round of questions that Aasheesh and Prasad have for each other, and then we can open it up to the audience.
So, I'm an old style of writer. I write with a pen or even a pencil. And I've been a reader for a long time. And since when I started writing, photographs were nowhere in sight, as in published books. They were, but they were in field guides, and even those had plates painted on them for birds. But there were enough books with illustrations in them, sketches or paintings. And I always thought that a book without illustrations is not really worth reading, but a book of this type. And there's nothing more that I enjoy than going through illustrations in book, especially line drawings, wood etchings, which have a human touch to it. Photography brings in a mechanical touch. And especially now, there was a time when you had to think about exposure, you had to think about which lens to use. Now you have cameras which do everything for you. And you just, and skill is still involved. Because if you want to get above that, automatic level, there is skill involved in photography. But art actually can interpret the writing according, artwork can interpret a writing. An artist has the leeway, the freedom to, like in the book, if my artist has drawn a cuckoo, because I talk about mangoes in it, she's able to bring a mango, perch the cuckoo in a mango tree. That may not be possible in a photograph if it were to accompany an essay. So there is this connect between the artist and what has been written, which I think is, which makes the book special. And in fact, the artwork in this book enlivens the writing. That is my belief.
Absolutely.
Nothing to take away from photography. Photography is the way to go forward, and you are left aghast at, that an animal which you don't even see is there on the page, caught in a motion, dramatic, exquisite, beautiful, colorful. That has its own charm.
Especially as we were talking about at lunch, Prasad's kind of photography, which, if I may, is sort of a classical form, which, it is in the moment and off the moment, but the patience leads up to that particular shot. And all of this might change with AI and all of that, but so further mediation is bound to happen, but it is the art form to be dealt with, and that is going to change, I think, the way we look at birds. Can I, before we turn
If I may, just about that point, I've been an editor of a magazine on Indian birds, and we get photographs for publishing in it, and 20–30% of those photographs have been doctored. No pun intended. Have been doctored. And, you can change photographs now as you like, and even National Geographic has published photographs that have been morphed, changed, etc. But this book has classic photography. What he saw, he shot, and what is produced is what he saw. There is no change in it, as far as I think. There's no editing, there's no enhancement, it's just there. So this is classic form of photography. Just wanted to.
Before we turn to the two questions that you have for each other, can I ask you, Prasad, to read out, you said you'd like to talk about the quote that in some ways is emblematic of your, that summarizes some of the vision of the company?
Yeah, so this is on page 181 of my book. It's from a book called The Living Company. This company inspired me almost 3 decades ago. It was written by a practitioner of management, unlike academic management authors, called Ari Dugus from Shell. So I just will read a few lines from this quote. It goes on for many pages. Companies who are defined as living companies understand how they fit into the value, create value new ideas, new people, and husband their money in a way that allows them to grow their future. And this is the important part. The defining elements of these living companies are conservatism in financing, sensitivity to the world around them, awareness of who they are, their identity, tolerance for new ideas, valuing people, not just assets, loosening the steering and control of the people in the enterprise, organizing themselves for learning, and actually shaping the human communities. These are the characteristics of companies which have lived long, been successful, created value for all their shareholders. And these are the elements I try to bring into our own organization in many different ways, through systems, policies, hiring the right kind of people, and encouraging these behaviors. So in a way, this book, The Living Company, is what inspired me in building Dr. Reddy's into what it is today.
So there's a great impact of your passion for nature on the way you have steered over the years the company, right?
So for example, about learning, there's this thing I learned that birds in England, a certain bird called blue tit, learned to peck at the bottles which had this aluminum cap, the milk bottles. The cream rose to the surface. They learned to pick open and eat the cream. It was a rich source of nourishment. And these were birds which were moving around in flocks. And these bottles were introduced, and the birds figured this out. Soon all the birds of this species in the entire country learned to do this. But occasionally a robin would also learn this technique, but very few robins learned this. Because robins are territorial animals, they don't tolerate each other. And we see this behavior in corporates also. They define their boundary, they're very territorial. Anybody comes in, they'll chase them out like territorial birds. Whereas flocking birds work with each other, they enjoy each other's company, and they learn from each other. So this is a behavior organizations and corporates can learn from nature, that flocking causes everybody to benefit, the entire organization to get uplifted. So this is one anecdote I remember from this.
We have, if we can actually cut into the questions for each other and turn it over to the audience. If there's a Q&A, yes.
Yeah, so my question is for you, Aasheesh. What do you have to say on the discrimination that happens where birds are concerned? When on the one hand, exotic birds are highly sought after, while on the other hand, people resort to inhuman ways like installation of spikes to keep pigeons at bay. By the way, Mr. Prasad, this happens in corporates too, if you know what I mean.
If exotic birds were as common as pigeons, I'm sure people would put spikes on their windows and windowsills for them also. So pigeons have increased in population because of us, not by themselves. These pigeons are actually supposed to be, they are originally called rock pigeons, and their habitat is rocks, not human cities, not high rises. So that is why, and people have realized that they not only spoil, and their droppings are all over the place, and those droppings are not healthy in the least. And flocks of pigeons of this size that are found across the country today, every street corner, every building, every colony, every housing society, people are fed up of them. And people do not realize, but they are really a very serious health hazard to human beings. I mean, pulmonary sclerosis is something which is related to pigeons, and it's a one-way ticket. There's no cure but lung replacement perhaps for that. And it's really very serious. And it's only because we feed the pigeons that there are so many pigeons. The only cure is to stop feeding. Pigeons will find food for themselves, and that is a normal biological process. When food becomes scarce, populations become scarce. And they have no predators in the city. They really have no predators. That's why there are so many predators. And exotic birds, as I told you, if they were as... So I hope that answers your question.
So Prasad has, just one moment, Prasad has a suggestion. He wants to ask the question of each other and then then go to the audience.
You want me to start?
Yes, why don't you start?
So, if you read the book, Aasheesh has a very sensitive eye. He sees the world through the eyes of the bird. And he recognizes the distress the birds are going through because of human activity. And there's a certain amount of sadness in each of his essay about the way things are not working for nature. So I wanted to ask you, Aasheesh, how could we channelize this sadness, this emotion, to make the world better for all species, not just for the human race? And I'm asking this in the context of the development we are seeing. There's urbanization everywhere. We can't stop it. Buildings like this will come up, will occupy the habitat of many species. But at the same time, is there a solution to make it a little better by channelizing this sensitivity, the understanding of other species, and how we can change our architecture, the way we make buildings, the way we make the environment?
So, in an earlier, when the book was released, a person in the audience had also said that there's a lot of sadness in my book. And I was taken aback and saddened by it, and Prasad also tells it. So a friend of mine told me, a very dear friend, he said, you know, the very fact that somebody recognizes that sadness means that he understands what you're saying and he empathizes with it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to recognize it as that emotion. It's not a sadness which is despair. It's a sadness of great feeling about the birds and how we relate to them. I think the first thing to realize is that there is non-human life out there. You know, we are so taken, the world is too much with us. We are just taken up with ourselves, and we don't really care or even notice or are sensitive to non-human life. Perhaps we go to the extent of taking care of pets, but no, that's not what there is out there. There is an entire world, you'll be surprised. I mean, there must be, in the space that you occupy, there must be at least 5,000 species existing there. You know, there may be a few birds, but you can't see most of the things that are around you. So one has to become sensitive to the environment around you, and then you'll start noticing why there are less why there is less non-human life around you. And then you'll start questioning, what can I do? If you empathize with non-human life, if you enjoy non-human life, if you feel energized in the presence of non-human life, you would want them to come closer to you, and then you'll start creating environments where they can exist. You have to not force them to live in your environments and say that, you know, nothing is here, no, nothing is coming up, but you have to create environments to which they can come. And for that, you have to understand their requirements, not what you are able to provide for them. And here we are talking about small improvements, like perhaps there's no water in this entire complex. A shallow bird bath is not, I don't see a shallow bird bath where birds will come in, but I do see enough glass around which can cause the death of thousands of birds. Birds migrate, they fly in the night a lot of the time, and lights disorient them, and they end up crashing against glass. Sometimes they think it's open, and they fall dead there. So you create an environment where you're sensitive to the requirement of non-human life, and that is the way I think that construction can be done. And I also feel that we have land is expensive and one wants to make the most of it, but, and one constructs almost on the entire land one has. So I think we should leave a little bit that is open, that is even a corner that is wild, where people ask, why are there no more sparrows? Sparrows require a little bit of rough, wild patch. They don't want cultivated lawns. They can't thrive in buildings like we make. They can't, they'll come and eat the canna flowers in your garden, but they'll, not do anything else. They need open, sandy patches where they can dust bathe. Do you know birds dust bathe to get rid of lice? Now, if we have marble or we have granite everywhere, where will they dust bathe? They can't do it, so they leave. So these are, you have to become sensitive to their needs and create buildings that will allow them to exist with you.
Well answered.
And you have to tolerate, above everything, you have to tolerate, that they will create a mess. Like you tolerate the mess of your pets, you have to, tolerate. Not to the extent of pigeons, but yes, they do create a mess. Or
they're sitting in an area that was once, like rocky. Aasheesh, your question quickly to Prasad, and then I'll take that question.
So there are several pictures in your book which are of darters, and I'm fascinated by darters. I wanted to know, are you also fascinated by darters? And I like the concept that since you're not a professional bird photographer who uses a cannon for a huge cannon for a lens, and you don't sit in the field for 4 or 5 days just to study the bird and then use your cameras, but you use what equipment you carry with you, but yet you are able to create a frame where action is still. If it were in the Deccan plains, it would be very difficult because, birds in trees are difficult to photograph, but he knows his limitations and the limitations of his equipment, so he concentrates on birds which will show up well. And freezing action in water is quite dramatic. You have splashing water, you have the bird preying on a fish. It's really exciting, and it's there that you can see. So do you really prefer that type of thing? What do you use?
So, the darter is certainly a fascinating bird, especially when you watch it hunting fish. And we must have taken thousands of pictures to get those pictures that I got in the book, sitting on the bed on the shore of the lake, setting your camera up and just waiting for a darter to go in, pick a fish and come out. And the interesting part is the moment the darter catches a fish, the cormorants go after it. And it's interesting to see how these cormorants steal the fish right from the mouth of the darter. And it's a much smaller bird, but it's very resourceful, I think. So I think it's just a matter of luck, patience, and sitting there at the right place at the right time. As you mentioned in your book, these darters were mostly taken in Bharatpur, where Bharatpur, the birds are not so scared of humans. They're habituated to seeing a lot of people around, and they don't fly away. Whereas around us, if we see a bird, we come within 100 feet of it, the bird takes off. So that helped a lot also. Bharatpur, the birds are okay, comfortable with you sitting about 30, 40 feet away. And that's the story of that picture. But, Bharatpur is an amazing place. It's a paradise for photography, for bird photography.
He says he's not a bird watcher, but he caught the action between the cormorants and the darters. Yeah.
I think there was a question.
I know we are out of time, so I'll keep it quick. One question for Mr. Aasheesh Pittie and one question for Mr. Prasad. Mr. Aasheesh Pittie, my question to you is, have you seen any conservation efforts where you think they have been really effective and have really kind of helped a species which was on the brink to kind of come back? So that was my question to you. And to Mr. Prasad, it's really inspiring, me being in the corporate world myself, how you have followed your passion. So my question to you is that I know it requires a lot of time to be dedicated. So how do you take your family along in this journey?
The vulture story is the biggest success story for India. I have seen vultures in Vanasthalipuram. There is a dump behind the Vanasthali Deer Park, and I've had the great fortune of seeing 300 birds rise up from the dump at one time. When we are bird watching in Vanasthali, we see the sky darken because there's so many vultures flying out, maybe a truck drove in or whatever. And now I have the misfortune of seeing not a single bird. So within 2 or 3 years, 99% of 3 species of the world's vulture population vanished. And that was because of a drug which we all use even today. It's called diclofenac. It's a painkiller, the best painkiller known to us today. It's in all the ointments we use, etc., etc. So what caused the vulture's death was that it was used as a veterinary painkiller by vets across India, and whether an animal needed it or not, it was injected so that, at least for 2-3 days the animal was fine. After that, perhaps it would die. But that was the reason, and vultures fed on these carcasses, and traces of that chemical remained in the tissues of the vulture and caused the liver failure, I think.
Kidney failure.
Kidney failure, with which they died. And this was discovered much later. So the success is that several Indian organizations and the department got together and bred vultures in captivity. And that plan has gone on since 15-20 years. Conservation is a long distance game. It's not a small, 2 years, 3 years, like the cheetah. Everybody is complaining that, how will it survive? What will happen? No, it's a 15-year, 20-year game you have to look at. And this is what has happened with the vultures, and now they are releasing more and more of those vultures into the wild, and people are seeing a lot more vultures in the wild. So that's a huge success story.
We'll take one more question. For everyone who has spillover questions, both Aasheesh and Prasad are willing to sign their books at book point. So buy them.
Just a simple question. Your most engaging wildlife experiences. And of course, what have they done about diclofenac after that?
So diclofenac was banned by the government of India some time back, and you can't manufacture it for veterinarian use. Alternative chemicals have been found out, manufacture has that gone up, but there's a huge gray market. Ointments we use as painkillers have diclofenac in it, but since there are no vultures, they won't eat us after we are gone. And anyway, that's besides the point. But yeah, that's what's happened about diclofenac. And I think the second chemical also, there is some reaction in vultures. So that is also in the process of being phased out. And a third one. So there's a very strong lobby against diclofenac. It's been banned. Officially, it's been banned. GOs have come out, etc.
So from a wildlife experience, I can't single out any one experience, but I'll tell you a handful of them. Watching the migration in Africa, the wildebeest herds, thousands and thousands of them all around you, and then coming together and crossing the Mara River, and zebras following them, and crocodiles killing and eating them. That was one thing which remains in my memory for a very long time. The other one is I like birds a little more, so I really enjoyed seeing the bald eagles in Alaska. The way they were flying and how they were feeding, hunting, all that. That was another great experience. In India, I think Kaziranga is another great example of a species being revived. I think the rhino is a big success story. So that was also a great experience for me.
So about the bald eagle, perhaps the founding fathers didn't know that it was a scavenger, and they thought it was this great bird of prey, but the country speaks for what it chose as an emblem.
It's also a story of success of conservation.
That is
true. DDT being banned, it came back. Otherwise, it was on the verge of extinction.
Yeah, because birds of prey are at the peak of their pyramid of food, the food chain. So all these chemicals go from tissue to tissue, and they remain in the bird, and ultimately they weaken the bird, or as happens with birds of prey, they weaken the shell of the bird, so of the egg. So when the bird sits on the nest, the egg cracks. That is how the peregrine and other birds of prey, their populations fell. My moment of great happiness, I love the osprey, which is also a bird of prey. It's a fish-eating bird. And we were bird watching in the, when I started bird watching, Ikrisat was a favorite haunt. And in Ikrisat, they have these little ponds which are stocked with fish. And we were bird watching on a winter morning, and we saw this bird come in, and it dived into the water right in front of us, just where you're sitting about 30, 40 feet away, and disappears into the water, and then it comes out. You've seen enough, nowadays on Insta, there are enough reels of osprey fishing. It comes out struggling. We wonder why it's floundering in the water, but it's caught a fish which is that big in its talent. Ikrisat had that. and it comes out and it, labors and labors and then climbs. And then when it's about 15 feet high, it gives a huge shiver to its body and all the water flies off its body. And then it catches the fish like this, but then it turns it like this and flies so that there is no air resistance at all. And just 20 feet above us, it was a fabulous, unforgettable sight.
And we could continue forever listening to these two, but we're out of time. So please give a big hand to Aasheesh Pittie and G.V. Prasad and line up and buy their books, read their books.
Thank you, Sita, for moderating this, and HLF for having us here, and Prasad for being here with us.